Hello and welcome to tomorrow's Science Discovery 2.03. My name is Lisa, I'll be your host today, and joining me is Jared, who will be helping me co-host. And we have an amazing guest lined up for you today. We have Dr. Vanessa Pirotta, who holds a PhD in marine sciences and is an expert in marine mammal conservation. She's gone around the world to places such as Tonga, Antarctica, and Madagascar, looking at things like the effects of underwater construction on whales and on using drones to collect whale snot. She's also the winner of FameLab, which is a science communication competition in Australia, and she was the runner-up for the global FameLab competition. So, Vanessa, I just want to dive straight into it. Your resume is just fantastic. It took me forever to summarize it down to be able to introduce you. But the first thing I want to ask is, you've always seemed to want to work in ecology and conservation. You have a bachelor's in zoology and ecology, a master's degree in the same thing, and then you did your PhD in conservation biology as well. So is this something you always wanted to do? Did you always be interested in conservation from a young age?
Thank you so much for a lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. Yes, I've always really been interested in animals and the wildlife ever since I was a young girl. And so to be able to fulfill this dream, which led from an undergraduate degree, which then I thought, okay, I'll go into a master's, which focused on a more conservation route, which was looking at preventing whale entanglement and fishing gear, which is super important, especially over in America with the North Atlantic right whale. And then, as you do, I went on to a PhD, which was, again, conservation focused, which looked at trialling practices of conservation applications that are both theoretical and applied to help conserve marine giants such as whales and also dolphins and porpoises. So yes, there's a whole host of conservation themes running through my PhD and undergraduate and master's study.
What was it about whales specifically and marine mammals that took your interest, compared to other kind of popular animals? A lot of people work on the cool, like for me, I love cats, so I would work on like lions and tigers and that kind of stuff. But yeah, why marine mammals for you?
Well, it's funny you say that because I actually worked with lions and tigers before I got onto working with marine mammals full time. I worked in a zoo previously, and it was a facility where it had rescue animals. So that was a really good beginnings there, and it was a great stepping stone to do what I'm doing now. So I had more of an understanding of what it was like to be next to a tiger than an actual domestic cat. And only now I've learned dealing with domestic cats that they're actually quite similar. But for me, the whales, like a whale is the coolest animal in my opinion in the world. And I know other people might go, no, actually, your cats are pretty cool too. But I think it's the way they look, the way they move. They're mammals just like you and I. They breathe air. And they are capable of making transoceanic movements across the ocean at different times of the year. In fact, it really hit home when I saw a whale in Antarctica, and I know this is probably something we'll speak about a little later. When I saw a whale swimming around in ice during my PhD, that just made these animals so much more incredibly cool. To see them off Sydney in my backyard and then to see them in Antarctica just shows just how capable they are of making huge movements across the ocean. And they do that every year. In fact, one of the longest migrations for any mammal on Earth. And so these animals are cool. And as well as that, they're big. So if you've ever been next to a whale, their sheer size just makes you go, whoa, this is the coolest thing to be around. So yeah, a combination of things that really got me interested. And also, if you're of the age where you remember, there was that movie Free Willy, where a young boy befriended a killer whale, which actually is the world's largest dolphin. And that really got me wanting to become a dolphin trainer and do more. So that was probably the ignition to help me go down this path.
Oh, man. I thought whales were cool beforehand, but now you've made me like them even more. But I guess I kind of want to get to, they're big animals, they're powerful, they migrate, they can live in different temperatures. But in terms of like humans and the way humans impact whales, some cultures traditionally ate whale meat and do whale hunting. So should humans kind of be concerned about how they're impacting these giant creatures?
Well, yes, many countries have an international obligation under the International Whaling Commission to protect whales. And in Australia here, we have whales protected under a very key piece of Australia's environmental legislation, which is the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. And so whales are listed as migratory species, and so we have protection for them in Australian waters and down to Antarctica. As well as this, humans make a lot of money off whales. Tourism is a huge thing, and there's scientific papers saying that whales are worth more alive than they are dead. And there are obviously cultures that still hunt whales, and that's obviously disputed around the world. But the whale watching industry is a fabulous way of learning more about whales. And yes, there have been studies which have looked at potential impacts of whale watching on whales, but there are very good initiatives to make sure that this is highly regulated in many parts of the world. So there's this whole connection thing as well. So if you see, like, for example, it's May here in Australia and over there, funny enough, except I'm talking to you from the future. It's now Sunday. And this time of year, you're going to start seeing a whole host of people moving to the coastline. And that's purely because they want to see a whale swim past. So there's this fascination with whales and this whole connection with the ocean. These whales, or whales, humpback whales, especially like the ones I work on, which look a bit like this, they can grow up to 17 metres long and have these funny little bumpy bits on their mouth, which are called tubercles, which have a hair sticking out of each of them. So they're a cool animal. They're very acrobatic. But people want to see whales, and if we can use whales as a connection or an alert for people to go, you know what, we need to care about our marine ocean, then I'm happy about that. And that's a really powerful thing. And especially the first time people see a whale, and I work on a whale watching boat here in Australia as a naturalist, that is out of this world. The moment that someone goes, oh my gosh, there's the whale. And for someone who's been watching whales for years, it might just be like the tiny little bit of a whale's dorsal fin or the tiny bit of the fluke, and people just get so excited. And for me, that's infectious, and that's a great way to help people connect to the oceans via these big animals.
So what are some of the difficulties that you have to contend with when studying whales? Because I can't imagine that that's a particularly easy thing in order to get data from whales.
Well, no, it's a really good point, because any sort of research on the ocean, you are very vulnerable to the ocean elements. So there's sea condition. So if you've got a nice flat sea, then everything's fine. But the moment it gets wavy and choppy and windy, you've got salt water. And for my work talking about electronics, which you'll shortly, you don't want any sort of seawater on anything expensive, because it can corrode it, and also you need to make sure you protect it. But you've also got weather, rain, the elements working on the ocean. And once you've got all those factors down, Pat, you need good whales to do any sort of whale research. So you need whales to be there, you need the right time of the year, and you also need the right personnel to work with when dealing with such large animals.
We've got a question in our chat room here. Saint Alex wants to know about, are you any closer to finding whales that are only known by its sound? Do you think it could be new species or weird hybrids? So I guess going into, do whales' sounds indicate what species they are, and how can we kind of tell what whales we're studying? Like, because you mentioned, the whales actually have to either be there near your boat for you to study them, or you need to be able to kind of maybe record their sounds underwater. So how do we combine both of those data to figure out what the whales are doing?
Well, this is a cool question, because in short, yes, some whales sound differently to others. So you've got the humpback whale, which sounds a bit like a creaking door at times, which is like this. And then they sometimes sound like this. Whoop, 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 whoop. And so humpback whales can make a number of different sounds, and it's the males that typically sing. It's only the males that sing to attract females, but also other individuals like young calves and also mothers might make moans and groans. But there's the dwarf minke whale, and if you've never heard of this whale before, this is a great Australian example. The dwarf minke whale is about 7 to 8 metres long, and they make a cool noise, kind of like a Star Wars noise, and it's May the 4th over there. And it kind of sounds like this. Ba-ba-ba-boing, ba-ba-ba-boing. So the way we can work out what kind of whale we're listening to is, if we have an idea of where they're likely to be found, that's a good starting point. Then if we have an idea of seasonality, so are they likely to be in this area during this time of year, then that's also another great starting point. There are a few ways that we can record sounds. and try and identify the type of whale. So there are handheld devices or underwater microphones, which are referred to as a hydrophone. And you can simply, on a boat, plop this down, feed out a lot of line so it goes a couple of meters down below, and then you listen. And if you can hear a whale, then that's really good. You can make a recording. And then there's a speaker which can be a directional speaker, which a hydrophone can sometimes be omnidirectional, so it can sweep across a range of around the speaker, so 360 degrees. Or a directional speaker can be placed holding a pole, and you, depending on where you want it, you can point the pole in the direction. And that's great for listening to sperm whales. And I'll talk about sperm whales in a moment. But there's also underwater hydrophone or hydrophone arrays, which you can basically underwater microphones that you can place down in the ocean, and it can eavesdrop on whales at certain times of the year. And they do this in Antarctica and certain locations around Australia. But the quick point here to finish up is that some whales sound different to others, which is a good point to know. And you have echolocating whales, which use biological sonar to navigate around the world. And they are usually the toothed whales, such as the sperm whale, which is the largest toothed whale at all. And they sound like this, a little bit. And it does vary on how they make their noise. But you also have the low-frequency communicators, and they are using low-frequency sounds to communicate over long distances. And I've just recently done a fantastic science communication piece with the Australian Museum, and that's on my website. So if you want to learn more about whale sounds, that's a great place to start as well.
I just need to have those whale sounds like recorded as little snippets that we can play. Like someone needs to record them and then put them in this like into Casper, and we need to play them at various times during this show. I think that would be great. So, Vanessa, you've really kind of convinced me how important whales are, and how interesting it is to have a diverse number of different whale species, and how each of them are really unique. But I kind of wanted focus here on the work that you were doing specifically with the drone and with the whale snot, which, by the way, is the best way to talk about what you're doing, like whale snot. We were kind of talking here before about what actually constitutes whale snot. Like, is it kind of like human snot? It doesn't really come out of their nose, like it comes out of their blowhole. So, like, can you give us a little bit first of clarification on what the whale snot is, where it comes from, and what's it made up of?
Well, if you think of your nose, we have two nostrils. I'm not going to pick my nose on live YouTube, but we have two nostrils. Did you know that whales have two nostrils? Except for the sperm whale, which only has one nostril exposed, and that's the left nostril, but that's too technical. So yes, whales have nostrils because they're mammals just like you and I, and they breathe air like you and I. And on top, so I'm going to use Winston here. So we have a whale, but if you turn Winston upside down, Winston's blowhole is located up here. And if you're looking at him on the side, then it's just up here. So it's on, their nose has migrated to the top of their head. So when they swim, they don't have to look up like we have to very uncoordinatedly. Whale snot is a great science communication term to describe the lung mucus, the mucosa coming out of the nose. So essentially, whale snot is a juicy biological mixture of health information coming from whale lungs. And this can contain information such as bacteria, DNA, proteins, hormones, lipids, and another whole host of information, but that's just a nice little summary. Otherwise, I get too biological and technical here. So essentially, the information we can collect from that blow, so if you ever see a whale come to the surface, yes, perfect image, and the lower whale, the one down the bottom of the screen there, you can visualize the blow. So essentially, when a whale comes to breathe, they've kind of got water sitting on top of their nose as is. But as they take a breath, due to the power of their lungs, it pushes whatever water is sitting up on their nose and pushes that out. So there's no water coming from inside unless there's a few drops from here and there. But essentially, that's information from the lungs coming out super fast, and it sounds like this, because I know you like sounds. So it's really quick. And because in some environments like Antarctica, it's cold, you can see their breath, you can see them breathing very well. So you can visualize it very well. And there's often a temperature difference because they're mammals like you and I, as I said before, they're sitting around 37 degrees. So when that comes out, you can sometimes see their air. And in Antarctica, you could see whale breaths everywhere. And so the blow, rather, you can see it just popping up every now and then in the morning, especially in the morning. It's so beautiful down there. The sun is rising. Well, the sun doesn't really set. It kind of just comes up and then goes down, just sits under the horizon and then pops back up again, depending on what time of year you're there. When I was there in summer, so it was quite nice. So yes, that's the information that you needed. They're mammals. They have 2 nostrils. They breathe air like you and I. They've got big lungs, and it's a whole host of information that we can collect from their lungs, which is whale snot.
So once we have this information, I'm assuming here that we use it to find out whether maybe the whales are sick or they're not doing well. So what can we do if we have this information and we know the whales are sick? Is there anything that we can even do to help them, or what are we using this information for?
That's a really good question. Yeah, well, why should anyone study whale snot? Well, this is a good point. And so we need to think about a few things here. Is that in the past, to collect any sort of health information from whales, we were limited to those that had either stranded, in which case their health was compromised, or whales that were deliberately killed, which is simply unethical. And so now we're using new technologies to collect information from free-swimming whales, such as whale snot, to provide a snapshot of whale health. Now, this is, first of all, a new method to be able, or relatively new, a method to be able to collect information that we weren't able to get from free-swimming whales before. So that's a big step. In addition to that, the use of drones is making this method completely much safer than other methods where people would use poles held over a whale's blowhole, which requires close boat approaches. So this is making collecting health information from whales safer. But the information we're collecting is also super important. So we're building up a library or baseline information of the types of bacteria living in whale lungs. And for the population I work on, which is a conservation success story, so people are like, well, why are you bothering studying these animals? We actually have an opposite problem here. We've got whale numbers that are doing so incredibly well that we're likely to see a population crash in the next couple of years or decade or so. So where the population just can't keep growing at the rate it's growing. So we're looking for ways to detect early changes in health. So this can be used as a population monitoring tool. Collecting these samples can be compared to other whale populations around the world and can also be used in combination with studying health on a number of different ways. So if we have internal lung information from whale snot, coupled with other techniques which uses drones to collect body condition via photogrammetry, where a drone is flown over a whale and it's able to take measurements. This can help build the picture up of a whale's health overall. And we can apply these methods to populations around the world that are not doing as well as the population I work on. Say, for example, the North Atlantic right whale, where their numbers are completely not very good, not in comparison to 30,000 plus whales that I'm working at. This population over in America, the North Atlantic right whale, the numbers are as low as less than 400. And that's crazy when you think of it, because their recovery time is a lot shorter than a humpback whale. But you also have other problems such as ship strike and fishing gear entanglement, which is a major problem to many animals around the world. So if we can better understand whale health, that's just one step forward to doing our bit to help conserving many of these amazing populations around the world. But also an opportunity to learn more about our oceans as well, because at the same time, we're collecting information of seawater from different environments around the world, and this information can be pulled together from whale biologists all around the world to help provide more information on whales and ocean health. So I hope I answered that in kind of a long way, but hopefully the message is there.
Yeah, totally. It sounds like, you did mention drones, and we're going to come and talk about how that technology came about and how you even go about building a drone that can go and help you do whale research. But it sounds like the information you're getting through these methods is opening up a whole new way to study these amazing animals. No longer do we have to wait for them to crash on the beach or if they get hunted. We can just kind of study them while they're out there living their natural lives and learn how we can kind of help the populations that aren't doing so well. Because as you mentioned, if we don't have whales, we lose the tourism industry, but I'm sure that the ramifications for the entire ecosystem would also get messed up if we lost these beautiful creatures.
Exactly. And many of your watchers or your listeners probably don't know that whales have important ecological roles in the marine environment. They do something which is known as, or I don't know if your listeners have heard of this, but the whale pump. There was a very famous paper a couple of years ago published in the scientific literature, which these animals, if you think about it, I know again use Winston, these whales are coming to the surface, breathing, and then going down, the humpback whale not too deep, but going down and eating krill or small fish. And then what they're doing, coming back to the surface, and then they're pooping, they're pooing. And so essentially what they're doing is moving a whole biomass from one part of the ocean to another part of the ocean by pooing. And this is bringing iron into different parts of the environment. So this is really important, and especially for smaller organisms such as phytoplankton, zooplankton, the tiny little microscopic organisms that you don't think of, which are basically the basis of the environmental food chain. But also when a whale dies, they're there in the ocean, you have sharks tearing parts, eating off it, and then eventually a whale will fall, and this is known as a whale fall, cleverly named. And then once a whale is on the bottom of the ocean, they are clean by marine organisms that will feed on it and will create a lot of productivity down below. So whales have important ecological roles. In addition to that, they also play roles for us as humans to see them, to make that connection, to do more to protect our marine environment.
So how exactly is the whale snot caught? And also, how did you get the idea to catch the whale snot in this fashion?
Well, the idea of whale lung microbiota or whale snot collection happened in 2000. So there's a few papers that have come out, well, actually only a tiny handful. So there was people in captivity working on captive animals rather, and there was a publication that came out in 2005 which looked at collecting dolphin blow, so dolphin exhale, and that was from captive dolphins. So captive animals do play a role, a large portion in scientific data collection, and which then set the standard for potentially transferring this method to larger animals. And so research then in the mid-2000s then worked on using poles to collect whale blow and holding it over a whale and waiting for them to breathe. But as I mentioned before, that requires close boat approaches and can be invasive when you think about the boat, but also kind of not safe for humans and also the whale. It can be collected, but it's not the ideal sample collection now that we have technology to improve that. And one of the earlier studies used a remotely operated helicopter, which, if you remember, they're kind of like the little racing cars. You can put ethanol in them and they're super loud.
Yeah.
But they work, and that was trialled, but with mixed results. And then since then, and especially when I started my PhD, it's a couple of years ago now, the use of drone technology to do many things has just revolutionized the way in which we, transport body parts, hearts, transport pizzas, that kind of thing. And for me doing this work, the use of drones really was a potential highlight. In fact, a couple of years ago, I was working with a fantastic drone aerial cinematographer. His name is Alistair Smith from Heligai Scientific here in Australia, who is actually my co-author and also my colleague doing this research. And we were looking at the use of what we were going to do, looking at body conditions, so photogrammetry, where a whale would have to stay nice and still at the surface and then take photos. But this didn't often work because whales on the northward migration off Sydney were kind of moving here and there, and they weren't kind of flat as they would be in a breeding and resting environment rather. So the idea to transform drones was naturally the progression of setting out to do more to help conserve animals and make research safer for the whale and also the scientists studying whales. And so what we were able to come up with is a drone, just like you're seeing now, which was custom built. So we didn't take an off-the-shelf product which was expensive at the time, but also not waterproof, and that was a big challenge. So what we've done is we thought, why don't we create our own technology to do just that? And so what you can see here is we have a quadcopter, which means is that 4 propellers, and I've actually got the drone that I'll show you in a moment. It has 4 propellers and it's got cameras to view where the drone's going, and it's also got a GoPro sitting on top where it can view sample collection. But the coolest thing about our drone, and this is the bit that's making it the next level of drone sample collection for whales is the Petri dish flip lid design. So essentially that round little circle you see on the video is the flip lid, the Petri dish opening and shutting. And what that is a device to collect our whale snot. So I'll show you the drone. I have it here. This drone is less than 2 kilos. It's super lightweight, and it has 4 propellers. It's a racing style type drone. It has a Petri dish here. This will open and close to collect the sample. A camera here to show the drone where it's going, and then also has a GoPro that sits up there, and all the electrical equipment is securely fastened inside this yellow bit. So we went with submarine colours, as you can see. It's very fun. And this drone will simply take off from a boat with a clean Petri dish, fly over to a whale's position, and then once in position, the drone is hovering, and then as a whale comes to take a breath, the drone Petri dish opens and the drone is flown through the densest part of the whale snot, and immediately after the lid is shut, securing the sample and minimising sample contamination. And that's how we collect our sample. And fortunately, we found that in over 70 so plus flights, we saw no behavioural change to our drone, so no behavioural response from the whales, which indicates that the whales either knew the drone was there and did nothing, or had no idea that there was a drone collecting their lung bacteria.
Wow.
There's actually a really good question in the chat room here. I didn't think about this. It's from Scott Ferguson. They want to know, wouldn't the propellers just like blow the whale snot away?
So I think are they thinking if the drone is over a whale, does it have the capability of blowing it away, or does the drone propellers have a massive amount of force down that the whales might be able to feel? It all happens super quick. So when a drone is over a whale, yes, there is definitely a downward draft that the propellers make, and we've measured this and visualised this, hence our reason for putting the Petri dish on top of the drone. Mm-hmm. But the moment that a whale is above the surface is so quick. So I would imagine that the feeling that they would have on their back is only a couple of seconds or so, and then there's water. Then as they go back down, there's water then which commences back on their back. So in short, they may be able to feel it, or they may just feel that that's what it feels like when they can feel air on their back. I don't know. I don't want to anthropomorphize it, but as a scientist, you can ask these questions to go, oh, yeah, maybe they feel this or maybe they don't. So, yeah, that's a great question.
And, you know, this is, we were talking before the show during our research about how amazing this level of collaboration between engineering and science is. Sort of like, what are the things you think we can do that can kind of encourage these kinds of continued collaborations? And any advice for either scientists or engineers that are looking to make these kinds of collaborations?
Well, collaboration is key to making a number of things happen, and it's so important. After all, if I didn't have any knowledge about whales, which I only have limited knowledge, and if I didn't collaborate with my drone engineer, we wouldn't have created such a colourful collaboration, essentially, to do just that. So I don't know where I would be a couple of years on right here, right now, talking if I hadn't collaborated. Collaboration is a great way to share ideas and to move forward with ideas. So if you know that you're an expert in something, but you need maybe someone else or an expert over here, coming together in the same room or Skyping or using Zoom, whatever we're doing right now, is a great way of sharing information and making opportunities happen. So I just say, have a chat. You never know what might come of a simple conversation where you've got a couple of ideas floating around to do potentially great things. And in this case, transforming the way we collect health information from whales using really cool technology. It's all about having a conversation, and it starts with you trying to be proactive and wanting to make things happen. And for scientists, we need to do this because we need to start communicating and getting our ideas out there rather than being sheltered and not wanting to share any ideas. And I appreciate that some research is completely sensitive as well. So it's not always, due to the nature of things, it doesn't always lend itself to being collaborative.
I love that you mentioned the importance of communicating about your work and getting it out there, because that's the way that you form collaborations. Is somebody might watch this video and be like, you know what, yeah, I want to join in with whales. I've got this really cool like underwater ROV thing that maybe we could like swim along with the whales and then we could learn more about them. And we are going to come to the importance of outreach and having these conversations between scientists and members of the public. But before we get to that, I did want to ask a couple more questions about the drone specifically. It seems like you guys betted on a technology that maybe wasn't as advanced or didn't quite exist very much like 5-10 years ago, but with the advancements in batteries and drone technology that made this drone be light enough to be able to carry a petri dish and fly it through a whale's blow. Like, obviously the batteries are going to get better as we continue, and drone technology is going to get better, and electronics is going to get smaller. So theoretically, your payload that you can carry on a drone is going to get bigger. So in an ideal world, what would you like to put on a drone next to measure something from whales?
Oh, that's a big question. That's also an exciting question. The answer to that is I'm still thinking about that, because there are so many directions that you could take this. And we have a few ideas in the pipeline, and which I, as I've talking about collaboration, I can't purely speak about right now. But there's a few ideas I've thought, would this work scientifically or not? But yes, the whole idea of technology evolving, essentially, it's always rapidly evolving. And so the first generation of our drones, the technology in that was good for the time, but it can be greatly improved now, which then can allow us to ask more questions. And that's what's exciting, because you've got a drone, you've got the basic idea of the structure and things work, but now the technology is getting smaller and lighter. And as you spoke about payloads, exactly that. We can mix these drones up to do more exciting things and adapt these to maybe doing other things other than whale research. So maybe it can go into looking at environmental research, looking at other species, monitoring, because the camera on it's very good. But watch this space. Let's hope that something exciting comes from future research, which I'm intending to do.
Very. It's just so interesting, though, that you guys were able to implement this so rapidly with that. And one of our chat room members, CFIT, is actually asking, how many different species have you managed to gather samples from?
Well, for my study, I've only managed to gather samples from humpback whales. I know it kind of sounds, that's not many. But humpback whales are really our model species, so we wanted to check to see if this would work. And thankfully, there's a lot of them which pass by Sydney. So that means that there's a lot of opportunity to get this right with a number of whales. But we'd hope to take this research to the southern right whale, which is here in Australia, but also I'd love to adapt this to looking at the North Atlantic right whale health, which are found in Canadian and also American waters. But we could also sample from other large whales like sperm whales and blue whales. So the answer is, if it's big and it creates a lot of whale snot, you can use these drones.
And how big is the sample that you get from that petri dish that you have?
Depends. So sometimes the drone can be there and it's in the perfect position. And as a whale comes to the surface to breathe, it's only a very poor, pathetic, and there's not much blow at all. Sometimes the drone can be there, and I've seen one of the best sample collections I've ever seen of Alistair, my pilot. He was actually above or looking for another whale, and another whale underneath him just took breath, and the whole drone was covered. It was all over it, and the petri dish was dripping. And if it's dripping with water, what appears to be water, it's a combination of things, as I spoke about. That's a good sample. But sometimes we can only get maybe a couple of sprays here and there. It's like a very light mist at times. You know, one of those like handheld devices which you can pump water? That's an okay sample, but the best sample is where we have droplets of sample.
Wow.
Oh, man. I would love to see this in action. This is just fantastic. And I just love that, the work doesn't just stop here. There is so much more. There are different species of whale that we might be able to learn about from this. That you're going to improve your drone design and be able to collect even more data. And I just congratulate you on being able to help this species that you've convinced me is really important to our whole ecosystem, and not just the tourism industry, but everything that goes along with that. So let's move on now to the importance of outreach, because what you're doing right now, convincing us of the importance of whales, is something that seems really important to you. I mean, you went and did this competition called FameLab, which for those of you that don't know, it's basically taking your whole research and condensing it down to 3 minutes or less and doing a presentation on it. And so Vanessa won the Australian competition for that in 2018 and then became runner-up in the international competition in 2018 as well. So first of all, how do you take all of your research and condense it down into a 3-minute package that people can actually still follow and understand?
Well, that is the key thing here. It's taking your research and making it accessible to people, a general audience. Because when you do a PhD, you become so specialised at times. It's kind of a bit, oh gosh, am I talking gibberish, or am I able to talk normal communicating language that is accessible to everyone? So essentially I needed to think about my research in a way that was going to get the key points, the message of why we're doing this research and why it's important. And then from there, create a bit of a story around it. And the FameLab Science Communication Competition is an international thing. It's run in over 30 countries. It's massive. In fact, this year in Egypt, they had the competition in front of the pyramids. It was a huge event, and it's even televised live on TV. So it's in addition to the 3-minute thesis. So 3-minute thesis stands separate. It's more of the reach of it is more global, and both competitions are great because I've participated in both. And so the FameLab opportunity here in Australia was great because I participated nationally and I was able to win that event, which was fantastic. And then as a result, I was flown over to London and went to the Cheltenham Science Festival, where I was able to talk whale snot to a whole host of different people. And that really started the conversation of whale snot globally, and also allowed me to share and think about my research concisely, but also having content, clarity and charisma, which are the 3 C's that this competition requires. And also outreach is a fantastic way of having information there to share with others that would normally just be restricted to scientific publications. And I don't think your average Joe would be looking at a scientific publication. I mean, I personally wouldn't if I wasn't in science. But that's the type of information that through my outreach work and competitions like FameLab can really help facilitate discussions around exciting research.
Yeah. I love distilling these things down to tools like the 3 C's that scientists can take on board and focus on those 3 areas when talking about their science. I think is really important. Do you have any other advice for scientists that might be looking to talk about their work? Like, how can they be more engaging, or how can they know what the most important parts to the story are?
Well, it's important to know as scientists that if you're going to communicate your research, it's not about you. And I know a few scientists think of that it's all about self-promotion, but rather it's not. It's about getting your research into a simple form that your family members could understand, your grandma, your parents, your partner, and having fun with it. Because every science research has a really cool story to be told. So you could kind of take components of your work and think about what it could be applicable to, or what's it's similar to in an everyday environment, and maybe use that as your spin to try and communicate it. But also scientists have access to great science communicators at universities. People in the media do a great job of transforming research into simple and more accessible chunks of information. So really use your resources that are available to you. Get online, get on Twitter, have conversations with scientists around the world. I've certainly done that, and it's been so beneficial, and I've met a number of wonderful people that I'll now call friends for a long time.
And, you know, when you're putting your research out there, I know that in my case, I did not know much about whales before even starting on this. So if you're going to be talking to someone who in general is sort of not in their wheelhouse of understanding, what is the best way to go about that? Is there sort of like a 3 C's to go into talking to someone who may not have that level of expertise?
Well, it's really important to know that, yeah, that's often something that science communicators come up against. One of the ways is I kind of like to ask questions before I go into discussing certain elements of my work, and that can kind of allow me to tailor the information that I provide. So that's also a great way of starting a conversation. sort of to know, if you're talking to a school group, or maybe if you're talking to someone like yourself with, a great level of knowledge and switched on, then I can use terms that would not usually come out when I'm giving a speech to a younger demographic. But it's also really important to not dumb down your research, and that's all about a balancing act. So you don't want to be completely talking down to an age group, but you want to at least instill that you've got hope that they can understand your work to a certain amount, and then read your audience as you're presenting information just to see what they really like and which components to go further with discussing.
I think you did
Hopefully that helps.
I think you did a great job of reading your audience today when you continued to make the whale sounds for us,
yes.
because the chat room absolutely loved them. So on the flip side, we talked about scientists communicating their work, but what about if you're a member or a non-expert in science, or just a member of the public who is curious and wants to know more about specific research? Like, is it kosher for people in the public to just reach out to scientists, or is that something you would discourage? Or how would someone who's just genuinely curious go about learning more from science in general?
I would definitely approach and ask questions to your favorite scientists. What's the worst that can happen? They bear in mind that often many of these people doing research at high level, maybe, for example, NASA folk, or people at universities, people are going to be busy, right? That's life in general. But sending a nice polite email or a tweet, contacting them via their social media channels, is a great place to start. And don't feel discouraged if you have one bad experience, because people around the world are likely to be different, but you're likely to get at least one kind response back from a researcher. Maybe you're going to get all kind responses back from researchers. So Twitter is a fantastic way I like to engage with my viewers. And I'm also on Instagram promoting some of the different types of outreach that I'm able to do and to share with others. And that's often a great avenue as to where I get contacted. My website, often people, scientists, professionals, have a website that they can be contacted via. So that's a great outlet. I often get people emailing me going, I've got a school project and I'd like to do a Skype a scientist with you. Can you do this? And I say, yeah. Because for me, it's really important as a scientist to be able to give back and to share some of the information that I've acquired over the many years. But don't be afraid. Get onto Twitter, even if you're not tweeting. And if you're a non-scientist, that's totally fine. We can't all be scientists. In fact, it's really refreshing to have someone who's a non-scientist to speak about some of this fantastic research. Make sure you use appropriate hashtags on Twitter, include appropriate people. Have a look at forums like this. This is often a great place to get your ideas and your engine running about collaboration, as well, as I was speaking about before. But ask questions and contact people, because it never hurts to contact people, and I've done it many of times. And I even had David Attenborough contact me via a nice, polite letter I wrote to him. He wrote back to me. So I encourage you to do anything you like to contact your famous scientists, or someone that you have a real interest in, or their research that's really interesting to you.
And Sifa in our chat room actually asked a really good question, which I think even scientists can kind of open themselves up to, trying to get an answer on this, which is, as an average person, how do we support your work? And even as a scientist, how do we also support other scientists in their work as well?
Well, that's a really kind question, and that is the type of thing that reinforces me to do more outreach. Like, that's a really kind, a kind comment and a kind thought that someone actually thought about that. This is an interesting topic, because obviously funding is the thing that comes to mind with most people. And as a scientist, I don't like to ask money from people, because I just don't think I think as a professional scientist, you can seek funding via alternative methods. But supporting cannot be just restricted to funding. Supporting can be talking about research, sharing it on social media, having a chat with someone on the bus about research. I know, even though it does sound a bit weird, but you can do it. Why not? Speaking on forums like this, generating discussion, maybe inviting speakers to speak elsewhere, to share the ideas. That is a great way of supporting this type of work, getting the message out there and spreading it around the world. I mean, I'm sitting here right now in Sydney and I'm talking to America. We're online. How great is that? This is the amazing times we live in, and I still really appreciate that as a scientist, to be able to spread the word of my research and to get the message out there. So if you're interested in something, share it on your social media channels. You never know who might read it or pick it up. That's a great step forward.
Dr. Pirotta, where can viewers find out more information about you and your work?
Well, that's a good question too. So I have a website. My website is an international website. So you can go to vanessapirotta.com. I'll spell it for you because my last name's a bit funny. VANESSAPIROTTA.com. And I don't know if you have a link to it, but also you can see my Twitter handle down below, which is @vanessapirotta.com. And if you are completely lost as to how to spell my last name, just Google Vanessa Wales Snot Sydney Australia, and there should be some pieces of information that come up. I mean, I spoke to CBS News the other day talking about ocean pollution, so there's another source of information that you can Google.
And Vanessa, if people have more questions, we didn't get to everybody's questions today, but can they tweet at you if they have any additional things about whales they might want to learn?
Absolutely. Go for tweet along. I'm here. It's early morning in Australia, and I'm more than happy to answer your tweets. I'm also on Instagram, so @vanessapirotta.com, or @vanessapirotta rather, same as my Twitter account. And if you're lost, you can always go to my website, and all my social media handles are down there.
All right, and Dr. Vanessa Pirotta, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I didn't know much about whales or whale snot, but now I definitely know a lot more than I did before the show began. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me, and have a lovely evening.
And of course, we also want to thank all of our patrons of tomorrow as well. Our citizens, you wonderful people are kind enough to help crowdfund the shows of tomorrow. It's not just Tomorrow Space or Tomorrow Science. There's lots of people behind the scenes that make this happen.
And Space News.
And Space News as well, that we're now doing weekly as well. So without your support, we would not be able to do this. So if you'd like to help us out financially, if you got something out of the show and you'd like to give something back, you can head on over to patreon.com/TMRO or subscribestar.com/TMRO. And in addition to that, if you can't do so financially, but you still want to help us out, you absolutely can. You can head on over to community.tmro.tv, and there are a multitude of ways that you can do that there. It's not just necessarily subscribe and share, although we definitely like both of those, so do those as well. But there's a multitude of ways that you can actually help us out here.
The button right down there.
It's somewhere.
This side,
It's somewhere in
hit
this
the button
screen.
and hit the bell too, so you're notified, right?
Yes, exactly. So, thanks for watching Tomorrow Science. We'll see you next time.